Good evening. Or perhaps, given the nature of what we're about to discuss, I should simply say, welcome to the quiet. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine you're in an old library, not one of those modern glass and steel buildings, but a place that smells of leather, damp stone, and centuries of dust. You're looking for something specific, but you don't know what it is until your fingers brush against a spine that feels different. It's bound in yellow buckram. The cloth is slightly frayed at the edges, and the color is an unnatural, sickly shade. It's the color of a bruise that's beginning to heal, or the sky just before a devastating storm. You open it, and you see that it's a play. Just a play. 2 acts. The first act is beautiful. It's poetic, perhaps a bit decadent. It lures you in with tales of lost cities and twin suns. You feel a sense of longing you can't explain. But then, you reach the second act. You've been warned not to. Everyone who has ever read the opening lines of Act 2 has felt a sudden, sharp chill, a biological no screaming from the back of their brain. But you read it anyway. The story goes that once you finish the second act of the play called The King in Yellow, your world doesn't belong to you anymore. The walls of your apartment seem thinner. The people you love look like strangers wearing masks. And far away, across a black sea you've never seen, a city called Carcosa begins to bleed into our reality. Tonight, we aren't just talking about a book. We're talking about an infection. We're exploring the legacy of Robert W. Chambers' 1995 masterpiece, a collection of stories that laid the groundwork for everything we call cosmic horror. We're going to peel back the yellow silk and look at the madness beneath. But a word of caution before we begin. There are rumors, internet myths, whispers in dark corners of the web, that the book itself is cursed, that to know too much about the king is to invite him into your home. None of that is true, of course. It's just ink on paper, fictional accounts from a long-dead author. Chuckles. Still, I'd appreciate it if you made sure your door is locked, just for the sake of the atmosphere. To understand the horror of The King in Yellow, we have to understand the man who dreamt it up. Robert W. Chambers wasn't a horror writer in the way we think of them today. In fact, for most of his career, he was a wildly successful writer of popular romances, what we might call beach reads today. He was wealthy, handsome, and lived a charmed life in New York. But in 1895, something shifted. Maybe it was the time he spent as an art student in Paris. Late 19th century Paris was a place of deep decadence. It was a city obsessed with beauty, but also with decay. The fin de siècle spirit. There was a sense that civilization was old, tired, and perhaps rotting from within. Chambers took that feeling and distilled it into a series of short stories. When the book was published, it didn't look like a typical horror novel. It looked like a typical collection of the era. But tucked inside those pages were 4 stories that would change literature forever. The Repairer of Reputations, The Mask, In the Court of the Dragon, and The Yellow Sign. These stories all revolve around the central forbidden object, a play titled The King in Yellow. In the world of Chambers fiction, this play is a global phenomenon. It has been banned by the church, suppressed by governments, and burned by the police. And yet, it circulates. It finds its way into the hands of the lonely, the eccentric, and the artistic. The play is described as being so beautiful that it's unbearable, and so truthful that it shatters the human mind. It reveals a cosmic truth that we are not evolved enough to handle. It's a classic trope now, the forbidden book. But Chambers was one of the first to make it feel visceral. He didn't describe the play in full. He only gave us fragments, scraps of poetry that feel like they were written by someone who had seen the end of the universe and found it elegant.
Listen to these lines, purportedly from the first act. Along the shore the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But as the poem continues, the imagery sours. Strange is the night where black stars rise, and thin moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is lost Carcosa. The horror of The King in Yellow isn't about monsters jumping out of shadows. It's about the realization that our reality is just a thin veil. And on the other side of that veil is a place where the stars are black, where the moons are thin and wrong, and where an entity in tattered yellow rags sits on a throne, watching us. Let's look at a case study of how this madness works. In Chambers' first story, The Repair of Reputations, we meet a man named Hildred Castine. Now, on the surface, this is a story set in a future New York, 1920 to be exact, which was 25 years in the future for Chambers. It describes a city that is clean, prosperous, and has recently legalized lethal chambers, government-run suicide booths for those who find life too burdensome. Hildred is a narrator we can't trust. He's had a head injury. He spent time in an asylum. He tells us he's fine now, but then he mentions that he's been reading The King in Yellow. As you listen to his story, you realize that the world he's describing might not be real. He believes he is the heir to the imperial dynasty of America. He believes the bizarre, deformed man named Mr. Wilde is a repairer of reputations who can help him seize his throne. But as the reader, you start to see the cracks. You realize Mr. Wilde isn't a powerful conspirator. He's a deranged man living in a hovel with a murderous cat. You realize Hildred's crown is just a piece of cheap gilded tin. This is the first theme of The King, the loss of objective reality. When you read the play, you don't see ghosts, you see the truth. But the truth makes you a madman in the eyes of everyone else. You begin to see the world as it really is, tattered, decaying, and ruled by ancient, indifferent forces. Chambers is asking a terrifying question. If you saw a truth that no one else could see, would you be the enlightened one, or would you just be insane? And in the end, is there even a difference? If the play is the infection, then the yellow sign is the mark of the disease. In the stories, characters often come across a curious, an amber-colored sign, often worn as a brooch or found engraved in stone. It is said that if you possess the yellow sign, or even if you simply see it and recognize what it represents, the king has a claim on you. There's a famous scene in the story The Yellow Sign involving an artist and a pale, doughy watchman at a nearby church. The watchman doesn't speak. He just stands there, looking like a plump white fungus. He is a harbinger. He is a servant of the king. The artist begins to have dreams of a hearse pulling up to his door in the middle of the night. The driver looks like the watchman and whispers, "Have you found the yellow sign?" This is where the horror becomes grounded, almost documentary style. In the late 1800s, there were genuine fears about degeneration, the idea that humanity could slide backward into something slug-like and repulsive. The king's servants are always described in these terms: soft, pale, inhumanly silent. They don't want to kill you, they want to bring you. They want to take you to the Lake of Hali, where the Hyades rise and the towers of Carcosa shimmer behind the moon. Think about the psychology of that. It's the fear of being claimed, of being marked by something you don't understand, for a purpose you can't fathom. It's like a medical diagnosis you can't read, written in a language that predates man. Let's talk about Carcosa. In many horror stories, the evil place is a hell dimension, fire, brimstone, and demons.
But Carcosa is different. It's an ancient city. It's silent. It's beautiful in a way that makes your heart ache until it breaks. It's a city of towers hidden behind the pallid mask. Chambers borrowed the name Carcosa from another writer, Ambrose Bierce, but he turned it into something much more ethereal. In Chambers' mythos, Carcosa is a place where the suns are twin and stagnant, where the water of the lake doesn't ripple. It represents the horror of the static. Nothing changes in Carcosa. It is a monument to a civilization that has already died but refuses to disappear. When the characters in the book start to see Carcosa, they aren't seeing a new world. They are seeing our world being overwritten. Imagine looking out your window tonight. You see the streetlights, the parked cars, the familiar trees, but as you watch, the light begins to change. It turns a pale, sickly yellow. The trees begin to look like twisted, frozen sculptures. The houses across the street start to stretch upward into impossible, windless towers. You aren't in your neighborhood anymore. Your neighborhood was just a dream that Carcosa is waking up from. That is cosmic horror. It's not that the monster is under your bed. It's that the bed, the room, and the entire planet are just a speck of dust on the sleeve of something so vast it doesn't even know we exist. And then there is the king himself. He is rarely seen directly. He is a figure in tattered yellow silk. He wears a mask, the pallid mask. There is a chilling moment in the play, as described in the book, where a character demands that a stranger remove his mask. The stranger replies, "I wear no mask." Think about that. If what you thought was a mask is actually the face, what lies beneath? The king represents the unnameable. He is a king of a city that is lost, a ruler of a people that don't exist. He is the personification of the yellow philosophy, that everything is decaying, everything is a facade, and the only thing that is real is the madness of the truth. He doesn't have a grand plan for world domination. He doesn't want your soul. He is more like a gravitational pull. If you are a certain kind of person, artistic, sensitive, perhaps a little broken, you are naturally pulled toward him. He is the patron saint of the disillusioned. It's impossible to talk about the King in Yellow without talking about H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft read Chambers' book later in his life, and it hit him like a lightning bolt. You can see the DNA of the king in everything Lovecraft wrote afterward. The Necronomicon, Lovecraft's famous forbidden book, is a direct descendant of the play, The King in Yellow. Lovecraft took Chambers' atmospheric, decadent horror and turned it into cosmic horror. He gave the king a place in his Cthulhu mythos, linking him to the great old one, Hastur. But something was lost in that transition. Lovecraft's horror is often very clinical. He likes to categorize his monsters. Chambers was more subtle. His horror was emotional. It was about the feeling of being wrong. In recent years, the king has seen a massive resurgence. You might remember the first season of the show True Detective, the references to Carcosa, the Yellow King, the Black Stars. It struck a chord with modern audiences. Why? Because we live in an age of alternate realities. We live in an age where the truth feels increasingly fragile. We look at the internet, at the endless streams of information, and we feel a bit like Hildred Castaigne. Which version of reality is the real one? Which mask are we wearing today? And that leads to the myths.
If you go on certain forums, places where people discuss lost media or cursed objects, you will find claims about the King in Yellow. Some say that Robert W. Chambers didn't write the play. They say he channeled it. They say the original manuscript was found in a monastery in Western Europe, and that everyone who touched it died of a lingering, wasting disease. There are stories of the yellow sign appearing in real life, graffiti found in abandoned hospitals, brooches found in the pockets of people who disappeared without a trace. I've even seen claims that reading the book aloud at 2 a.m. can cause auditory hallucinations, that you'll start to hear the clink of the king's rings against his scepter. Let's be very clear. These are stories. Robert W. Chambers was a human being. He wrote a very good book. The Curse is a brilliant piece of marketing that has lasted for over a century. There is no evidence, none, that anyone has ever gone insane or died because of these pages. But there is a reason these myths persist. It's because the book feels dangerous. It taps into a very specific, very real human fear. The fear that if we look too closely at the world, it might stop making sense. Psychologists sometimes talk about derealization, a state where a person feels like the world around them isn't real, like they're living in a movie or a play. People who experience this often describe the world as looking flat or artificial. That is exactly what Chambers was describing in 1895. He was describing a mental breakdown using the language of myth. He was taking the feeling of unreality and giving it a name, Carcosa. He was taking the feeling of being watched by a cold, indifferent universe and giving it a face, the King in Yellow. As we wrap up our exploration tonight, I want to leave you with one final thought. Chambers eventually stopped writing horror. He turned his back on the king and spent the rest of his life writing stories about beautiful people falling in love in country houses. He made a lot of money. He died a peaceful death. Some people say he got scared. They say he realized he opened a door he couldn't close, and he spent the rest of his life trying to pretend the door didn't exist. But I like to think of it differently. Maybe he realized that the king doesn't need a herald. The play is already written. It's written in the way the shadows fall in your hallway at night. It's written in the silence between your heartbeats when you're lying awake, wondering if you're the only person left in the world. The King in Yellow isn't a monster coming for you. He's just a reminder that the normal world we built, our jobs, our cities, our reputations, is a very small, very fragile thing. I've talked a lot tonight. My throat is a bit dry. I think I'll stop here. But before I go, just a small observation. I noticed that throughout this script, I've mentioned the color yellow quite a bit. It's a strange color, isn't it? It's the color of gold, of sunlight, of joy. But it's also the color of sickness, of old teeth, of the pages of a book that has been left in the sun for too long. I hope you have a restful sleep tonight. I hope your dreams are filled with familiar things. And if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night and you notice that the stars outside your window look a little blacker than usual, don't worry, it's just the atmosphere. Just don't look for the sign. Good night. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Once you step into the King's Court, there is no turning back. We have many more forbidden histories and lost manuscripts to uncover, and you won't want to be left alone in the dark when the next one arrives. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever experienced something that made you question the solidity of the world around you? Leave your story below. Or simply type Carcosa, so I know you've made it all the way to the end of the second act.